A rape crisis center in Bloomington has a long wait list after losing federal funding.
They definitely do not want to see those services impacted.
And it's turning to McLean County for help. That story just ahead on WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on today's show, a look at new ways the county could spend its sales tax money for mental health. The city of Bloomington has a few ideas.
We have an increased emphasis or awareness of our homeless population. We have an increased awareness of the migrant situation.
And we'll take you to the backwoods of central Illinois for a hunting expedition, something fewer Illinoisans are doing these days. Those stories follow a Bloomington Normal News update just ahead. This is Sound Ideas on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington Normal Audiology. Hear My Story continues with local patients Ralph and Carol Weisheit.
I was actually going to add that was one of the reasons that you went, was because I kept saying, you're not listening to me.
And she thought it was my hearing, yeah.
See what I got to live with?
Ralph and Carol's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. A Bloomington-based rape crisis center lost several $100,000 in what had been annual federal funding last July. It's since been struggling to manage a growing wait list of clients from across McLean County needing sexual assault services. WGLT's Melissa Ellen reports the center is looking for local sales tax dollars to fill the void.
Since the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault decreased its grant to Stepping Stones, the Bloomington-based Rape Crisis Center's wait list has reached up to 65 people. Stepping Stones director Jen Galladay says the current staff size can't meet demand, and there's no money to hire additional help. She says people may turn to unhealthy methods of coping or be forced to pay for counseling, among other outcomes.
That can have long-lasting impact on the community based on these people not getting the help that they need when they need it.
Unable to find enough funding elsewhere, YWCA McLean County has turned to local government for help. YWCA is the organization that houses Stepping Stones. It's asking for $100,000 in one-year stopgap funding, primarily to hire an additional counselor that can help tackle the wait list. The McLean County Government's Behavioral Health Coordinating Council is set to vote on the proposal Friday. If the members are to approve, the next vote will be by the McLean County Board Executive Committee, then on to the full county board for final approval. With the next county board meeting being held next week, that could mean funds get to Stepping Stones as early as this month. Any money would come from the shared sales tax for mental health and public safety purposes. County Board Vice Chair Elizabeth Johnston says she hopes to vote on the proposal soon because Stepping Stones needs it.
Because it's such a crucial and such an effective program, they definitely do not want to see those services impacted.
The Rape Crisis Center will use the funds to hire back the counselor it lost, fund part of a current staff member's salary, and pay for volunteer stipends. In the meantime, Stepping Stones is potentially losing clients. Director Jen Galladay says the long wait list has been a deterrent. She pointed to one client who came in for on-site crisis services. She says the person was upset and had been having panic attacks following a recent assault. They wanted to press charges.
We had a very long session, probably close to 2 hours, and went through all the paperwork. And at the end, I had to tell that person that they were number 60 plus on the wait list, and I had no idea when we would be able to serve them. And it was truly heartbreaking. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes to have to tell them that that was the case.
When the client's turn finally came at Stepping Stones, Galladay says they were no longer interested since so much time had elapsed. Galladay estimates this is the case with up to 70% of people who wind up on the wait list. She adds that sexual assault services are crisis services, so there's usually an immediacy to when people would like to receive help.
We are reaching people past the time that they were ready to start and begin this journey.
There are also a lot of people in the community who need these types of services. This, according to YWCA CEO and President Liz German.
If we were really serving every single client that we could, it would be probably about a third of this community.
Since July, Stepping Stones has seen around 200 clients, more than 100 of whom received counseling services. If the county is to pass this stopgap measure, it would mark the first time shared sales tax dollars are used to support an existing program in the county. The funds have historically been used to help launch new programming related to behavioral health, such as the Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center. County Administrator Cassie Taylor says YWCA's request fits nicely with the tax dollars' purpose.
Certainly, when a person is a victim of sexual assault, they are put into a crisis. And so we do have a component of the mental health action plan that is deliberately concerned with our crisis system within McLean County.
County Board Vice Chair Elizabeth Johnston says the parameters of the proposal are clear.
This is not meant to be an ongoing fix for the YWCA. This is something that they have a wait list. And if they don't have the money, they will lose a counselor, and then that wait list gets even longer.
YWCA CEO Liz German says the organization is continuing to look at other grant and donation opportunities to help fill the funding deficit they face. She adds the decision to come to the county came from necessity, and it was a last stop. I'm Melissa Ellen.
The Behavioral Health Coordinating Council meeting, where the first vote will occur, starts Friday at 7:30 a.m. at the Government Center. Melissa Ellen covers mental health as a Report for America Corps member. Report for America places journalists in local newsrooms across the nation to cover underreported topics.
Support for WGLT mental health coverage comes from Report for America and Chestnut Health Systems, caring for the community's physical and mental health and celebrating 50 years of service.
For a roundup of the day's most important business and economic news, catch my colleague Kai Risdahl later today on Marketplace. No econ degree or finance background required.
Listen beginning at 5:30 on 89.1 FM and WGLT.org, Bloomington Normal's public media.
A little cash can help a family eat.
Callie, hungry yet?
Do more for the kids.
We went to a water park.
Yeah, that was fun.
And stay afloat.
And then the furnace broke. And I was just like, oh God, this would have sunk me.
So could you fight poverty not with a fancy program, but just by giving people money? Tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News. This is Steve Inskeep. Listen to Morning Edition weekdays from 4 to 9 a.m. on WGLT.
Sound Ideas is WGLT's news magazine. I'm John Norton. The city manager of Bloomington says the city may want more out of the sales tax money the city sends to McLean County. The conversation with WGLT's Charlie Schlenker arose from a question whether the city would like to cap the amount of sales tax money sent to the county for mental health programming. City Manager Tim Gleason says the city does not want such a cap and is satisfied with existing services and the level of communication from the county. Gleason says there are underserved areas that money could also support.
We have an increased emphasis or awareness of our homeless population. We have an increased awareness of the migrant situation. Now, should there be an expectation that some of these funds, that we are supplying the county, should they be a part of funding the ultimate solution in both of those additional areas? So when the agreement was first entered into several years ago, that really was not an issue. That was trying to meet the needs, the emotional welfare challenges of the community needs. So, this is a new component to this. And rather than the city, and I don't want to speak for the town, but rather than the city fund more to the 501c3s that we already fund here, I think we are realizing that the ultimate solution, that's not going to be enough. So where do we find that additional revenue to be able to address this in its permanent form?
One of the identified needs to address the homeless issue in Bloomington Normal is a lack of permanent supportive housing. Are you suggesting that mental health sales tax money be allocated to something like that?
I'm saying it's a possibility. I'm looking at the budget, and I'm looking at these new needs that are out there, and the expectation that we're a part of that solution. I've got to explore all areas of existing revenue to be able to address that need.
Are there other potential areas on homelessness or other human service needs that the county is currently not doing that should be considered as a use for that sales tax money that you're willing to identify now?
I don't think so. I feel the most appropriate answer right now, and it's not to suggest any level of dissatisfaction. I think it's an incomplete conversation that all the players have not had. It's a priority, but it's just an incomplete conversation at this time. Because another part of this, it's not the revenue stream to the county, it's also what are the 501c3s doing to try to look for a permanent solution to this. So we're in this temporary sort of this emergency phase on this issue, and then we're leaving it to them. And we're a part of this conversation, but really we're allowing them to run the lead. Home Sweet Home Ministries, Matt Burgess is doing an excellent job. He really seems to be the person that has emerged as the lead in this conversation. So they're exploring possibilities for this. So once we get to a point that we've got a couple of options to choose from as this long-term solution, that's when the ask comes back to the city and the town of this additional funding request. I know that day is going to come. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we find grant funding somewhere. But I guess I'm fully preparing for the day that does come. That's going to drive a conversation with the county and other sources of revenue to be able to meet that need in our community.
Are you then calling the homeless situation an emergency?
Oh, I definitely think it is. You truly try to find the opportunity in this, and that's not a half glass full type of answer from Tim. I truly believe this because, something, whether we're talking about the migrant population, but specifically to the homeless population, the thing that I refuse to ever lose sight of, and I feel that I've got a responsibility as city manager, is this is somebody's mom or dad. This is somebody's brother or sister. So there is a human component to this, and definitely want to let the 501c3s do what they do, but I also realize that I've got a part in this, and actually I want to have a part in this solution. So you see all these little pockets of homelessness around the community. They're sort of congregated now in one area. To answer your question about is this an emergency, I think there have been times that it has, but I think that we're sort of breathing a little bit, working towards what that permanent solution is. A central location where that population can get the services that they need. I think that we're working in the right direction.
Is the conversation between the 501c3s, the county, the municipalities, and other actors, other stakeholders, at a point where you have a definite timeline to get to policy decisions?
No definite timeline yet, but it is advancing. We've got so much going on at the city, but this is definitely one of those that's gained a lot of attention, as it should, and we're working towards what those possibilities are. So let me take this down a different path. As we are considering different things, what does zoning allow? And then also exploring under a formalized emergency type of declaration, does that allow for a memorandum of understanding or an intergovernmental agreement where it's sort of a trial period, in any given location versus coming right out and saying that we need this zoning change, and then what's the ramifications of that? That might be a great solution for this topic today, but what does that open the door to, in other areas? So exploring the possibility that we do something under emergency authority that allows for this to be a trial period to see if it solves the issue.
How does current zoning limit where you can put permanent supportive housing or some other tool to address the homeless?
Right now, there's no provisions for permanent housing. When you talk about like tiny homes, pallet homes, stuff like that, there's no provision in our current zoning code that allows for something like that. So what you have is possibly you have an attachment to offerings through a church affiliation that might allow for that, but we know that that's not the cleanest approach. And then also Eastview Church that purchased the old Y property. They've got a mission. That's why they acquired that property, and housing homeless population might not fit the best there. We're exploring other possibilities. It's a larger conversation, but all the parties are together and talking through this.
What has to happen for a formal declaration of emergency, and what does that declaration give you?
Looking at that right now, that's a recent internal conversation, but it's something that the city would adopt. It does give some allowances, and this is one area. It's not dissimilar to, my former community. with a disaster declaration. You know, it's not dissimilar to those kinds of emergency powers and authorities that were adopted in a situation like that.
That's Bloomington City Manager Tim Gleason. He spoke with WGLT's Charlie Schlenker about that possible emergency declaration and potential additional services for either migrants or the homeless that could be funded by the portion of the sales tax that goes to McLean County, currently for mental health programs. The newly released McLean County Regional Planning Commission draft Regional Housing Recovery Plan identifies a gap of at least 330 units of permanent supportive housing for the homeless in the Twin Cities. Thanks for listening to Sound Ideas. This is WGLT's News Magazine. Coming up tomorrow, you'll get a preview of the races that will affect McLean County voters in the primary later this month. You'll hear from the two men who are trying to unseat first-term Congressman Eric Sorensen. Deer hunting requires some skill along with a bit of luck and a lot of patience, but the pastime is not as popular as it once was. Rich Egger from Illinois Public Radio spent a morning with a deer hunter in western Illinois to learn more about the sport.
Mike Folk and I are walking along the edge of a harvested farm field southeast of Macomb. Mike is a maintenance supervisor for Durham School Services, which operates buses for the Macomb School District. But we're not here to talk about school buses just after sunrise on this hazy, damp, and chilly early December day. We're in this open field to bag a deer.
Duck hunting is my main passion, but we hadn't got a deer last year, so I wanted to focus on trying to get a deer this year.
Why is getting a deer important?
The meat, it will last us a year or so. So it's that's part's important. Plus, it's a lot cheaper than having to go buy a beef at the grocery store.
We make our way to a hunting blind, which is like a small tent. The camouflage pattern on the blind's exterior helps it blend in with nearby shrubbery and trees. So we start the hunt by sitting. This is a game of patience. And it's a game Mike took up only about a dozen years ago. His first hunting experience came after he married Stephanie, who, full disclosure, is one of my coworkers. She's from a family of hunters, and Mike says the land we're on is owned by one of her uncles.
Lucky enough, I married to a family that hunted, so I never hunted. We had firearms. We was raised with firearms, but we weren't really hunters. I was always target practicing or paper shooting.
Mike has taken down around half a dozen deer here in the past. He shot his first deer in 2011, the first year he hunted.
And all of a sudden, here comes this buck. He was a smaller buck, but he was my first deer, and I shot him, and he went immediately down. And I think I was so excited. That's kind of what got me hooked too. Plus, doing everything, your adrenaline's pumping. It was just super exciting.
In contrast, this has been a low-key morning. We pass the time looking through the blind's windows while munching on snacks. Mike tells me about another time he was out in the blind.
I actually was sitting here in the middle, and I kept hearing this noise outside the blind. And finally, here comes this chipmunk popped underneath, seen me, then ran to the other side and went back out. So,
not much meat on a chipmunk, huh?
No. He was having fun, though.
We're set up in an area deer like to pass through, but so far we have not seen any deer or chipmunks or much of anything. Then Mike spots a coyote.
Yep, there's one over there. He's just past the tree line. You see where this thing that's kind of sticks up in the middle between these sets of trees here? He's on the other side of it, the coyote. He's just sitting there. He's out hunting too.
We're out hunting, the coyote is out hunting, but overall, deer hunting is declining in popularity in Illinois. Numbers from the 2022 season show the state had roughly 122,000 firearm deer hunters. A decade ago, that number was 163,000. Dan Stevens hopes to help reverse that trend. He's program manager for the Illinois Learn to Hunt program. It's a collaboration between the Illinois Natural History Survey and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. He says the program provides an educational pathway for people who are interested in hunting but don't have someone in their immediate family to teach them or just don't know how to get started. Stevens believes hunting is beginning to appeal to millennials who want to provide food for themselves and their families.
Kind of taking grasp of the ownership of that harvest and not just relying on, buying chicken nuggets from the market, but being a part of that local food system.
Stevens says hunting helps manage the state's natural resources. He says every time you buy a hunting license, firearm, ammo, or archery equipment, some of that money goes to conservation programs. And a December 2021 report from the Sportsmen's Alliance Foundation says hunting boosts the overall economy nationally. It says recreational hunting and target shooting in the U.S. generated more than $65 billion in combined retail sales in 2020. The report also says spending by hunters and shooters supported nearly 970,000 jobs and created more than $45 billion in wages and income. And for people like Mike Folk and Dan Stevens, hunting puts food on the table. Here is Stevens again.
My wife and I made a decision about 5 or 6 years ago that we wanted to try to move away from factory farmed meat as much as reasonably we could. And so we have basically not had to buy beef since then.
Stevens says they now harvest 2 or 3 deer a year. But for Mike Folk, there are no deer to harvest on this day. The only deer we see the entire morning is a young doe crossing a country road as we drove out to the farm. And, well, the law does not allow hunters to pull over and start blasting away, even out in the country. We leave the blind and walk the field, trying to flush out any deer that might be hunkered down. But no such luck. Still, Mike considers it a morning well spent.
Definitely peaceful.
A little too quiet for what you would like today.
Yeah, I would like a little bit more action, but that's just part of hunting. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't, but you got to be out there to get your chance.
He says hunting is an opportunity to get away from screens and get back to the basics.
I think if more people got out to go out in nature, they'd have happier lives.
This was the 6th time Mike headed out during the deer hunting season and the 6th time he had no luck. Yet he remains optimistic.
Yeah, there's always tomorrow.
And so we pack up the gear in his white 1997 Jeep and head down the gravel driveway, back onto the road and into town, back into the world of screens and stores, and away from the time he enjoys out in nature, waiting for that next chance to put food on his family's table. Rich Egger reporting.
And that's Sound Ideas today, WGLT's news magazine, made possible in part by Bloomington Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton. Story help today from WGLT's Charlie Schlenker and Melissa Ellen, and from IPR's Rich Egger. Ryan Toohey edits Sound Ideas. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.